afternoon. I'm Julia Coakley, and on behalf of the MGAA, I'd like to welcome you to our briefing this afternoon, which is being delivered by Megha Kumar of CyXcel, a business owned by Weightmans. Before handing over to our presenter, I'd just like to cover some housekeeping points. Please ensure your microphone and your camera are off. If you would like to ask a question, please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. If we don't get an opportunity to answer your questions, Megha will be delighted to answer your questions post-event. The MGAA's Programme of Learning Insights has been accredited by the Chartered Insurance Institute for the quality of content and supporting materials, with CPD hours applicable if relevant to your ongoing professional development. The recording of this briefing will be available on our website and MGAA YouTube channel, with a PowerPoint presentation to follow post-event. Finally, you'll be sent a feedback survey. Please do take time to complete this, which should take no more than 2 minutes, as this allows us to deliver the best quality events to our members. So today's briefing, the AI arms race and its business impact, is being delivered by Megha Kumar, Chief Product Officer and Head of Geopolitical Risk at CyXcel, a Weightmans-led product and business. Megha brings over 14 years experience in product innovation, service delivery and client development in the geostrategic intelligence and country risk industry. Megha has been a long-standing trusted advisor to C-suite decision makers in Fortune 500 and FTSE 100 companies across the technology, energy, mining, finance and infrastructure sectors. Within the public sector, she has worked extensively with major governments on national policy and regulations and various international bodies, including the United Nations, IMF, NATO and the World Bank. She's a well-known expert on global digital and technology policy, emerging technologies such as AI, digital market regulations and on developing Asian economies. So Megha, if I might hand over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm part of CyXcel, which is a cyber consultancy wholly owned by Weightmans. Among other things, CyXcel helps companies such as those in the insurance industry to optimize how we use AI so that you can meet your business goals, retain your talented employees, while also making sure that you meet your data protection and compliance obligations and cybersecurity requirements. So I've divided the presentation today in 4 main parts, each of which is a learning objective for this session. Let me just move the slides forward so you can see what those objectives are. Can you confirm that you can see my screen all right?
Yes, Megha, thank you.
Great. So the key 4 parts of this discussion today focus on the following things. First is the overview of the technology itself. What is it? What can it do? What it can't do? And what are its pitfalls? The second discusses the business impact of AI in 4 key domains: economy, society, politics, and cybersecurity. The third explores the environmental paradox that AI presents for business. It can be a great boon, but it can also exacerbate the climate crisis. And the fourth and the final part lays out the direction of regulatory travel in key jurisdictions for AI. So let's get started. As AI continues its rapid evolution, policymakers, business leaders, civil society organizations are struggling to keep pace with the risks and opportunities that this technology represents. AI promises to drive economic efficiencies across sectors, democratize access to knowledge and information, improve public security, and create new pathways to ecological sustainability. However, the same technology can trigger negative disruptions in labor markets, the information ecosystem, definitely in cybersecurity, but also in the field of kinetic security, and add to the climate crisis. The challenge of harnessing the positives and reining in the negatives of this technology is made harder by the intensification of geopolitical rifts, especially between the United States and China, which are not only the 2 top AI leaders, but also increasingly hostile to each other. This has triggered intense competition among nations over technological supremacy and increased regulatory divergence, leaving businesses to deal with a patchwork of unclear, uncertain, and incomplete rules. Let me drill down into some of these themes for the next 25, 30 minutes, and then we can open the floor to questions. So the first part, what is this tech? So generative artificial intelligence systems sit within one branch of AI called deep learning, which itself is a subset of machine learning. Machine learning requires large amounts of data and the use of a series of specific instructions, which are otherwise called algorithms, to help AI systems identify patterns. Its progress was long hindered by a dearth of both large enough data volume and the required computational power to process them. This started to change in the early 2010s thanks to two things. First, a data deluge, which was generated by the widespread adoption of smartphones and users' willingness to share text and personal photos on the internet. And the second was the availability of more computational power. These two shifts allowed the development of deep learning, which is loosely inspired by the structure of the human brain. Such AI systems have multiple layers of artificial neural networks, which are trained on vast data sets. During training, these models learn to identify patterns and develop an understanding of relationships. This involves adjusting the model's parameters, which are values or variables that a model uses to make predictions or decisions, and these parameters get tweaked over time to minimize errors. Put differently, the machine improves its predictive accuracy, its problem-solving skills, and articulation capability as it does more tasks and receives feedback. In other words, it learns by doing, just like we humans do. Foundation models are either standalone AI models or base AI models, which can be pretty basic or highly complex. This graphic sort of lays out what the the supply chain of foundation models looks like. So foundation models can be customized by the host, so which is, say OpenAI or Google, to develop applications like, say, ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot or some other similar AI application. And these models then can perform a wide variety of downstream tasks, such as content generation, problem solving, creation of an image or an audio. And the application users, which can be me or you as an individual, or it can be us as members of an institution, then use these systems for a wide variety of tasks. OpenAI's GPT series, for example, which is really what has triggered this storm, is a foundation model. And upon that foundation model, ChatGPT has been built and other companies have built other applications such as Microsoft's Bing search engine, Copilot, so on and so forth. One of the most established application branches of foundation models is generative AI, which are systems trained on large data sets of natural language content or images or video or sound. And then they're specialized to create new and original content. And that content can be in the form of a text, an image, a video, an audio visual, or data analysis or computer code. So in that sense, because they are creating original content in some format, they are generative. Some systems can only take text as input and only generate text as output. Most customer service chatbots are like that. The first version of ChatGPT 3.5 was like that. But now we have a whole generation of increasingly powerful multimodal AI systems, which can take text, image, sound, and produce various forms of output. So examples of multimodal generative AI are, for example, the DALL-E series from OpenAI, which can create images based on image and text prompts, or Sora, which is a text-to-video model. Meta's AudioCraft can create sound and music. The list goes on. Generative AI is the latest in this decade-old field of deep learning, but it is imperfect. Most obvious and commonly known imperfection is that it hallucinates. It produces plausible-sounding gibberish. It also produces inaccurate, harmful, and misleading information in some cases. And thirdly, it's not clear exactly how an AI model reaches the answers or inferences that it does. In that sense, these models have a black box nature. They're opaque. They can reproduce and amplify the biases of the training data that we may not be aware of as human users of that system, and and those biases can be reflected in the inferences. A recent research paper, which was published last month, shows that generative AI models such as the GPT series work in a very similar way as human brains do in many, many areas, not just in terms of learning by doing. So AI models in this class of AI research identify patterns and make conceptual associations just like we humans do. Man, woman, king, queen, daughter, son. These are the associations we humans make in our brain. Incidentally, the AI models actually do the same thing. They compartmentalize different tasks. So mathematical computations, for example, over time get concentrated in one part of the neural net of an AI system, whereas language processing will get concentrated in others. This again is very much like the human brain, where the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes of the human brain perform different functions. Some process language, some process spatial awareness, some process auditory input, and so on and so forth. So we are improving our understanding of how these models work, but we are still a long way from full understanding. Cognitive scientists still don't know exactly how we humans make decisions, how we arrive at certain decisions. However, we are still held responsible and accountable for the decisions we as humans make. We still don't know how generative AI makes decisions, but we are, in the current legislative and liability regime, still responsible for the decision that an AI system that we've used has made, and however it affects the market or consumers, our stakeholders, and so on and so forth. I will say a little bit more about that later in the talk, but for now, despite the current limitations and the lack of a clear liability regime, the technology nonetheless marks a step change for three major reasons. First of all, the vast data sets on which these models are trained give them the ability to respond to basically any question. You can ask ChatGPT for a banana bread recipe, you can ask it to analyze UK energy policy, and you can ask it to break down the structure of a cancerous cell. Only a very large ensemble of people at different skills level, at different expertise level, would be able to perform such a vast and rather random range of tasks. And in that sense, this technology is more general purpose. It can be used for more than one thing. It is proficient in natural language. So far, this has been largely a reserve of the human brain. But AI models more and more show the ability to understand context, nuance, seek clarification, correct mistakes, summarize, edit. These models also have the ability to use their reasoning, problem-solving skills, linguistic features to create highly realistic, unique, and new content. Now, the explicit goals of companies such as OpenAI, which is still a leader in the AI technological innovation space, is to progress beyond foundation models towards what is known as artificial general intelligence, AI systems that match or exceed human capabilities. Now, the estimated time of arrival of AGI, artificial general intelligence, is not clear. Estimates vary from 2 to 20 years. But what we do know is that this technology is advancing at spectacular speed. Let me give you a flavor of how rapidly we have developed. GPT, which was only released in 2018, had 117 million parameters. Just 2 years later, in 2020, we had GPT-3, which had 175 billion parameters. Broadly speaking, the higher the number of parameters in a model, the larger and more complex it is, and it's also able to perform a larger variety of tasks. Rumors are that GPT-4, which is already now 2 years old, had 1.7 trillion parameters, but the company hasn't shared that information. The market for applications of GenAI, nonetheless, is expanding rapidly. We have generative AI tools for creating text, audio, videos, software code, and more specific tasks such as analyzing financial data, climate change data, soil health data, write proposals, resumes, sales decks, so on and so forth. Even the developers don't fully understand the full potential of the models we have already, let alone limited or full artificial general intelligence. But utopians are overjoyed and dystopians depressed with how close a machine has come to performing one more set of tasks that was hitherto a preserve of the complex cognitive architecture of the human brain. This brings me to the second part of our discussion, which is AI's impact. AI developers, corporate adopters, all the members who are present for this discussion today, policymakers, civil society, broadly agree that for every productive and beneficial deployment of AI, there will be many disruptive, destabilizing, and some outright harmful applications. The impact, both positive and negative, will be felt in every domain: economic, social, political, and cybersecurity. All these domains affect businesses directly or indirectly. Let me give you one example from each of these 4 domains to highlight the benefits this technology potentially promises us and the risks that we must actively manage. Optimists see generative AI and foundation models more broadly as augmenting workers and a range of workplace tasks. So let's focus on what this means for labor markets. Knowledge workers, such as doctors, lawyers, stock traders, analysts, creative workers, such as artists, or business workers, such as sales teams, administrative staff, can build, customize, and leverage generative AI systems to automate routine tasks, such as screening documents, brainstorming, coming up with first drafts of marketing documents, sales documents, so on and so forth. At the more advanced level, within the insurance industry, for example, AI will be used for increasingly evaluating the weightage of an insurer's or a broker's portfolio. How much of your portfolio should be, let's say, real estate as opposed to health, as opposed to natural disasters. It'll also be used to process data that feed decisions to set the premium bands for insurance policies. Larger firms will be able to invest even more in using AI, for example, to create digital twins. For example, with regard to catastrophe risk modeling, which feeds directly into the insurance policy framework for natural disasters. And we know that with regard to climate change, that risk is rising. So using AI to better understand the risk landscape and issue policies appropriately would be hugely beneficial to both customers and their providers. Now, AI can help you do all these things faster and more efficiently, provided you secure your data and can minimize the biases or gaps in your training data, and ensure that human judgment is exercised at all the relevant stages when you are acting on the results generated by an AI model. I will highlight also later in the talk what risks we potentially accept if we transfer agency to the AI, not just in terms of making decisions or recommending decisions, but also executing that decision. For the time being, if you've used AI for these purposes, you can free up time for workers to do more value-added work, to allow people to prioritize tasks that require empathy, human communication, charisma, strategic planning, tasks which humans still do a lot better than computers. It could also diminish the competency gap that businesses can suffer from between many highly skilled workers and their currently less skilled peers. And this can have an impact on the talent pool available to businesses, but it can also help people in terms of reducing income gaps. Since unpaid work like grocery shopping can also be automated potentially, new workers, especially women who unfortunately still do more unpaid domestic work than men everywhere in the world, could join full-time paid work. It's also likely that this technology will create entirely new job categories. So research shows that around 60% of US jobs in 2018 had titles that didn't even exist in 1940. This sort of indicates the positive impact of innovation, technological innovation, on job creation. Put differently, some jobs will be reshaped and restructured with the development and adoption of AI in the workplace. But several entirely new categories of jobs will also be created due to that technological advancement. This, however, is the optimistic end of the spectrum. Skeptics, on the other hand, see AI eliminating jobs because of the potential of this tech to augment and then ultimately automate several types of tasks. AI's augmentation phase, which is already underway, sees dynamic interaction between technology and workers in areas such as clerical tasks, decision-making, data crunching, preparing first drafts, so on and so forth, and roboticization of certain manual and digital tasks such as planning and data evaluation, or altogether in heavy industry, for example, manufacturing. but the impact is nonetheless quite serious. Between now and mid-2030s, globally, 427 million jobs have augmentation potential, which is about 13% of current global employment. High-income and middle-income countries are more likely to be affected compared to low-income countries during this period because of the differences in digitization. More advanced economies, wealthier economies are more digitized, which means they are ahead of the queue in terms of harnessing AI, but that also means that their labor markets will get disrupted sooner and potentially more hard than lower income countries. So this is the augmentation phase, but then comes the automation phase that a lot of skeptics are worried about. AI's automation phase, which is expected by the mid-2030s, will affect tasks involving physical labor, manual dexterity, but more sensitively, real-world responsive problem solving, such as in transportation or manufacturing or in finance. At this stage also, high and upper middle countries will be more affected, as well as jobs predominantly carried out by women across all income groups. Globally, 75 million jobs have automation potential, according to ILO statistics, which is about 2% of total global jobs right now. A key point here is this. A significant transformation of global labor markets appears inevitable, but a massive elimination of jobs is not. Much depends on the ability, for example, of national governments to widen public access to digital infrastructure and digital skills, and initiate targeted policies for those most vulnerable to AI's augmentation phase and automation phase. Moreover, as the nature of workplace tasks get refined, companies of all sizes will need to focus on reskilling, upskilling, and constant retraining of their staff. A big unknown is the pace of AI innovation and adoption. Both could go faster than expected for many reasons. Compared with general purpose tech, generative AI requires less physical infrastructure overhaul than was necessary to facilitate the transition from steam-powered trains to electric trains. Also, these models are highly customizable, and once built are cheap to run and increasingly user-friendly. The new normal, therefore, is uncertainty about the speed, scale, and scope of AI adoption, insofar as its impact on labor markets is concerned. Labor markets will get disrupted. There is no doubt about that. But reskilling and upskilling could become a key policy and business obligation. Now let us turn to the social impact of AI, and here a particularly useful example is the impact of AI on healthcare. UN projections suggest that 17% of the global population will be over 60 years old by 2050, and 10%, which is about 10% of the current global population. This has been termed by some as an imminent retirement crisis. Among other things, this demographic shift will put an enormous strain on the pension system, taxation system, and public spending, but most obviously on the healthcare and health insurance system. On the other side of this equation are countries with large populations such as India, where the absolute number of the elderly is large, but the overall population is relatively young. However, matters are not easier because this younger demographic also lacks access to adequate healthcare. AI can prove a vital resource for addressing the impacts of these demographic shifts and its related healthcare challenges. Already, AI tools are being used for preventive medicine, diagnosis of major diseases, and accelerating new drug discovery. Such generative AI-based healthcare chatbots are being used to promote democratization of healthcare, ease financial pressures on countries with large aging populations, and lower the cost barriers that developing countries face in making healthcare accessible to their citizens. In the United States alone, the overall net savings opportunity using current AI techniques without sacrificing quality or access has been estimated at 5 to 10% per year, which is equivalent to about $200 to $300 billion. Compared to 2019. Now that is a massive saving, and the beneficiaries will be many. As this chart shows, the beneficiaries will include hospitals, which can save potentially up to 120 billion per year, physicians up to 60, public payers of healthcare up to 40 billion per year. Beyond these savings, obviously the most valuable aspect of AI adoption in these cases will be an improvement in healthcare outcomes. With the help of this tech, as has been the case for all medical technologies we humans have invented so far, people can live longer and healthier lives and optimize how they cover for contingencies by virtue of, say, health insurance or something else. However, such gains have to be weighed against the potential negative consequences, most notably on healthcare employment, as I discussed earlier. In August last year, The Lancet published the world's most comprehensive study thus far on the use of AI systems for detecting breast cancer. The Sweden-based study covered over 80,000 women and found that AI can detect breast cancer as accurately as 2 radiologists. Moreover, AI detection did not result in more false positives. That rate was 1.5%, which in turn mitigates risks about misdiagnosis. This finding is path-breaking. Breast cancer is one of the most prevalent forms of the disease. It affected about 2.3 million women globally last year alone, and nearly 700,000 women lost their lives to this disease. But the good part is that this disease is curable if it is detected early. So while leveraging AI for breast cancer treatment seems like the obvious and right choice from a healthcare perspective and from a healthcare industry perspective, it also means potentially there is no need to employ 2 radiologists for such a diagnosis. One would be enough to do the screening, reading, and ensuring that patient trust is maintained throughout the healthcare cycle. So if every second radiologist, for example, loses their job, as a society and as employers, we will have to think about how we leverage AI to improve health outcomes, but also make sure that we can re-employ professionals who lose their jobs. As more studies emerge on AI applications, governments, businesses will have to weigh up the social benefit and employment-related cost of using this technology across all sectors, not just healthcare. Now let me move to another key domain where AI will be transformative, but potentially problematic. And that issue concerns the integrity of the information environment and the public discourse and what impact it can have on our politics. Now, as I've mentioned before, generative AI can produce original text, image, audiovisual content faster and more cheaply. And the quality of this content is improving rapidly with every iteration of AI models. However, it can also help adversarial actors produce highly realistic misinformation and disinformation faster and more cheaply. Several misuse cases in the political domain are already known. A deepfake audio clip of President Joe Biden was used in the US election campaign to mislead Democratic voters earlier this year. This eroded the integrity of the electoral process. Deepfake images have been used to create non-consensual, highly graphic images of prominent female artists such as Taylor Swift and ordinary school kids, undermining their fundamental rights, as well as leaving them vulnerable to other nefarious crimes such as extortion. Deepfake images of bombed sites in Gaza have been used to spread misinformation and divide public opinion on the Israel-Hamas war. This has fueled protests for and against Palestine in several countries. Deepfake audiovisuals have been used to create fraudulent images of the Ukrainian president, seemingly surrendering to Russia. Again, this is an attempt to undercut Western support for Ukraine and influence the direction of the Russia-Ukraine war. There is concern that as AI becomes more freely available and better at producing content, synthetic mis and disinformation will be circulated on an unprecedented scale on social media and other online platforms. And this information will in turn be circulated on traditional media platforms such as radio or TV. Moreover, generative AI-based personalized chatbots, which can mimic human language, tone, and logic, can be used in their tens of thousands to communicate with humans in a more interactive and persuasive way. This could sway voters, undermine the integrity of the electoral process, harm the reputation of a company or its staff and services, and it can degrade the quality of information in circulation and polarize public debates. Now, let's be clear. Disinformation by domestic or foreign actors is not a new phenomenon. Even before the emergence of generative AI, several governments, PR firms, and political parties worldwide were producing misinformation on an industrial scale. And social media have been a prominent platform for such campaigns. And it makes sense because social media platforms have an unparalleled global and vast reach. There are about 8 billion people on the planet. Just over about 5.5 billion are online, and 5 billion of those are on social media. So you can see why social media would become one of the most important channels for the circulation of good and bad information, of human-generated as well as AI-generated content. The problem is that generative AI is constantly changing the technological landscape of communication, but our solutions for tackling this disinformation are outdated and ineffective. Social media firms have tried to address this challenge, for example, by labeling synthetic content, preventing their generative AI tools from being used for political advertising or lobbying, or creating content that very closely mimics a prominent person. But bad actors have been able to game these systems and get them to produce content that they want, regardless of the guardrails that an AI developer may have put in place. And then there is a business side of this. Social media firms generate a lot of revenue from misinformation because that tends to generate more user engagement. And even if the large social media companies did enough, there are enough open source generative AI systems and plenty of networking websites where moderation is by design minimal. Governments are in a tight spot. The democratic ones cannot risk overreach because that would undermine free speech. But equally, democratic governments are the ones that have been at the most receiving end of harmful information, whether it be regarding the pandemic, about the vaccines that were used during the COVID-19 pandemic, and now over elections, wars, and so on and so forth. So generative AI can expand political inclusion by democratizing access to information, analysis, and knowledge, but it can also poison the well. Now let me turn to a related issue, which is of security, especially cybersecurity. As in the case with other domains that we've discussed here too, AI promises both risks and opportunities. Generative AI-enabled security programs are emerging, which can help organizations identify and respond to security incidents more quickly and effectively. AI programs can also be used to run highly realistic simulation exercises or to test an organization's defenses and its incident response strategy should they suffer a cyber incident or a data breach. This is not a trivial promise. The benefits are huge due to the rising risk of cybercrime. The global cost of cybercrime reportedly exceeded $10 trillion last year and could rise to $20 trillion by 2026. Cyber attacks against critical infrastructure, for example, the NHS in this country, can bring a whole sector to its knees and cause serious damage to both human health, human safety, and human security. So any gains that this technology can make in terms of improving cybersecurity is a very, very good thing. But the same AI tools can and will be used for harm. Now, generative AI is being used to step up phishing campaigns. It's no longer obvious typo-filled scam emails. Now, cybercrime criminals are using highly tailored, professional-looking messages that are much more likely to trick people. AI-generated deepfakes are creating convincing videos or audio clips that mimic trusted figures, from CEOs approving large payments to well-known personalities spreading false information. Voice generation AI can evade biometric identification systems, for example, by creating highly realistic but fraudulent voice imprints that can compromise authentication systems used by banks. Malware is also advancing. There are specific versions such as the Black Mamba, which uses AI to constantly modify its code, making it capable of evading detection by traditional security measures. And AI can also speed up credential stuffing and brute force attacks, allowing cyber criminals to test passwords at a rate no human could match. So now, while phishing, malware, faking credentials, etc., are not new techniques for cybercrime, Gen AI could increase their scale, their success, and their speed. AI can make phishing emails even more convincing and at a large scale. This has not been possible so far. Deepfakes can increase the speed of an attack, which means that if your security tooling or security teams are not quick and agile, they will miss a major threat. AI-made malware leads to a faster attack cycle, which requires security teams to be more agile and proactive. Now, another set of risks that AI poses for cybersecurity is not unique to generative AI, which is the potential of training data to be leaked or exfiltrated or contaminated for adversarial use by hostile actors. This means that if you're not careful about how you secure your data, how you collect it, how you store it, how you process it, and what data you put into a generative AI model, even if you are using a corporate subscription, say, of Copilot, you could potentially have your data stolen or leaked publicly. And the liability of that breach would, under current laws, rest with the business user, not the vendor of the AI tool. Some vendors are building certain cybersecurity-related safeguards and protections into their tools. For example, they will not let officially their generative AI model write malware, but these blocks don't always prevent attackers from eliciting such code or content through indirect requests. So in turn, AI can be a boon to cybersecurity, but it can also be a new serious risk for those seeking to cybersecure their environment. So far, we've discussed the impact of AI on the economic, social, political, and security domains. I've argued that in each domain, the technology promises enormous gains, but also pitfalls that we need to manage carefully. Now I want to turn to the third part of this discussion, which is the environmental paradox of AI, which is intrinsic to the technology itself. On the upside, AI can be a vital resource to help us address the climate crisis. These uses include creating digital twins of the planet, for example, to predict climate shifts and extreme weather events. AI algorithms can predict electricity and water consumption patterns using historical and real-time data, which in turn can help utilities allocate resources more efficiently. For renewable sources like wind and solar, AI algorithms can analyze weather forecasts, historical renewable generation data, and real-time conditions to boost output. AI can also make significant secondary contributions to help us achieve net zero targets. For example, in shipping, machine learning is being used to improve the speed and route planning for ships. This can help reduce energy wastage across the shipping industry, which is highly polluting and very hard to green. In agriculture, machine learning and agri-chatbots can help farmers get real-time data on crop and soil health and irrigation levels. This can optimize the use of fresh water for agriculture and reduce wastage. But on the downside, the sheer process of developing and deploying this tech is resource intensive. It doesn't matter how you use it, it's resource intensive. AI models use large amounts of electricity during the training, deployment, and maintenance phase of their life cycle. And in turn, therefore, they contribute to carbon emissions. AI systems also require huge amounts of a renewable but finite resource, which is fresh water. AI's so-called thirst comes from the need to cool servers in data centers that power these systems. Although preliminary, research thus far presents a relatively concerning picture. So global AI freshwater withdrawal could exceed 6.5 billion cubic meters by 2027, which, for the sake of proportion, is roughly equal to all the freshwater Malaysia consumed in 2020. In terms of electricity, by 2027, AI servers could use 85 to 134 terawatt hours of electricity per year. This is how much electricity Argentina or Sweden or Netherlands use in one full year. Now, since about only 1/3 of global electricity currently is sourced from renewables, this high electricity consumption is going to increase CO2 emissions. Now, research shows that training GPT-3 produced 500 tons of CO2 equivalent, which is this one in the middle. This is equivalent to the annual emissions of 81 people living in the EU or 33 in the United States. Now, in the face of the climate crisis and the global net zero target by 2050, it varies by country, there will be greater scrutiny into the resource intensity of AI and demands for greater environmental sustainability. Now, remedial action could take multiple forms and by different actors. Now, greater investment and reliance of tech companies, including data centers, on renewable energy and water would go a very long way in addressing the resource intensity of this tech. Similarly, if we could have improvements in how much water is consumed by these models, we could have greater water efficiency of this tech. And that is possible because it currently varies enormously. You can have in Ireland a much more water efficient AI model compared to, say, Sweden at the bottom of the chart. Electricity consumption may prove prohibitively costly for AI vendors themselves. So reducing, therefore, the commercial incentive to push for all-purpose global adoption of AI. Instead, niche AI models, which have fewer parameters, they are trained on less data, they may become more preferable. In fact, niche models also tend to produce more accurate inferences. You can kind of see this as a common sense level. If a model can produce everything from a banana bread recipe to the structure for cancerous cell, it's been trained on a very vast and diverse set of data and can potentially make more wrong inferences and hallucinate a lot more. But if a model is trained only on, let's say, skin cancer data, it's more likely to be focused. And if it's making errors, one is more likely to be able to correct those errors and identify the problems or gaps in the data. Another solution would be greater understanding by consumers themselves. Not all inferences are made equal. So, for example, if you're using a generative AI model to generate text, it uses less electricity and resources than the same model would use for image generation. So more consumer education about what is more and less environmentally sustainable seems important. Policymakers, for their part, will need to strike a tough balance between global, national, and institutional climate goals and ensuring that this potentially transformative technology is adequately resourced in terms of its electricity and water needs. Importantly, though, this is not a puzzle for the future. The risk is here now. Droughts in key AI supply chain nodes, such as Taiwan, and the high level of water stress worldwide already means that AI's environmental paradox is here now. Now let me move to the fourth and final part of this discussion, which focuses on the direction of regulatory travel. The regulatory approach to AI falls across a very wide spectrum. The United States is at one end of the spectrum, and China is at the other far end. The United States is falling into a regime of so-called soft law by default, to regulate AI. I will say more about that in a second. A large number of countries such as the UK, Japan, Singapore, they've adopted a more soft law approach, but by policy design. These countries prefer a flexible overall AI framework that promotes innovation and mitigates risks when identified. By contrast, the EU and China have favored a hard law approach, comprehensive legislation seeking to address the wide-ranging concerns about the risks that AI potentially poses to national security, national economy, and civil liberties. The EU's AI Act, which became law earlier this year and will be phased out over the next 2 years, takes a risk-based approach to regulating AI. So the Act prohibits the use of AI for uses such as social scoring of human behavior. It tightly regulates high-risk uses, for example, in determining employment or housing-related decisions. It imposes stringent transparency requirements for foundation models, and it attaches some transparency rules at a barely minimum level to low-risk AI uses such as consumer chatbots. China is taking a hard law approach and has made it clear that political censorship remains an abiding commitment of the Communist Party, and applications must steer clear of politically sensitive content, even if that means that the AI system will not answer some questions. Beijing also wants to ensure that these AI tools advance its core economic goals, industrial policy, and affect the real economy, for example, by facilitating credit access in the economy or making healthcare services more accessible or making employment contracts more transparent and digitally recorded. And to that end, China is expanding its computing infrastructure, its data storage capabilities, and it's offering economic incentives to a whole range of AI startups. The United States is at the other end of the spectrum due to the federal gridlock. Progressive Democrats want a comprehensive federal AI legislation, but the Republicans oppose it. Now, with the election of Donald Trump, US AI policy is likely to become even more hawkish. His administration is likely to view AI almost exclusively through the twin lenses of competition with China and national security. And his focus will be on keeping private sector AI developers unencumbered by regulation. So one may ask, what is the role of dialogue and collaboration given the divergence in approach? China's AI regulation is prioritizing the state's interest. The EU's AI Act is prioritizing the individual and citizens' rights. A whole host of countries, including the United Kingdom, so far have not taken a hard law approach, even though the new government here has proposed a bill, so we'll see how far that goes. And the US is largely prioritizing commercial interest and geostrategic competition with China. So is there room for dialogue and collaboration, especially around the global risks of AI? At the moment, I'm afraid my answer will be no, there isn't. We know that AI systems can exacerbate the climate crisis. I've dealt with that issue in some detail earlier. But the risks go farther than that. So AI systems can enable rogue actors to acquire techniques required to develop deadly pathogens or chemical weapons. In cyberspace, AI could shift the balance between offense and defense in favor of offense. Malfunctioning autonomous weapon systems that are able to make decisions and execute them could have catastrophic consequences. Despite these risks, however, competition rather than collaboration are the dominant features of the current AI ecosystem. And that competition prevails between countries, between AI developers, as well as corporate users of AI. Nobody wants to get left behind. Unlike nuclear weapons technology, the most cutting-edge AI is emerging entirely from private sector hands. which means it's harder to regulate, harder to control, and harder to remain sort of transparent about who has what capabilities and what uses those are being put to. The geopolitical rift and competition in turn mean that for the most part, individual countries with their own political ideology, their own economic interests, their own social complexities, will have to find their own AI pathway. Even though on many issues, especially climate change, what we need is global cooperation. Let me conclude by saying this. AI is still in its infancy, but it is developing rapidly. Its best and its worst has yet to come. The next iteration of AI is already here, which is something that's being called agentic AI, which can automatically make decisions, but more importantly, it can execute those decisions and communicate with other AI systems about those tasks. These new AI agents aren't just responding to prompts or generating content, they are taking action. This is promising. Imagine how a company could scale and expand its service offering if they had a whole army of AI agents selling, for example, insurance policies or writing me a health patient medication summary or issue a car deal for me based on my preference and schedule. But if the AI executes the wrong decision, then we have a business disaster in terms of reputation, in terms of what we sell, in terms of what obligations we may have to the regulators. All we know for certain is that this technology can serve, it can harm, and it can remedy. And the harms can be curbed if policymakers regulate this technology wisely. Right now, nobody has perfected that art. If AI developers develop and roll out this technology safely and with greater accountability, again, this is not happening right now because the liability has been transferred to the users, not to the developers. And if AI uses, not just in the insurance sector, but across all sectors, think about how the technology will affect your business, your employees, your own data, your own cybersecurity, and your own ESG goals. The answers are not very many, but I think the important questions are here. I hope that this presentation has at least raised some important questions and given you a macro understanding of the risks and opportunities that this tech presents. Hopefully by now you have a better understanding of what this tech is, what impact it can have on the economy, our society, politics, and security, what environmental risks it presents and opportunities, and the direction of regulation. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'd be happy to take questions.
Hi, Megha. Thank you so much. That was quite the content, but incredibly interesting and actually incredibly worrying, the extent to which AI and generated deep fake. I was wondering about, the likelihood of that impacting on future claims, and the evidence people submit. Regrettably, we are completely out of time. But as we said at the top of the meeting, if we do have delegates who have questions, Megha has very kindly offered to answer any questions post-event. So if you just send them into either your contact at the MGAA or our info or our member services inbox. I have dropped our feedback survey into the chat box. If you could take 2 minutes to complete that, we really all would be very, very grateful. We do take your feedback very seriously. But it just leaves me to say thank you to Megha and CyXcel and of course Weightmans for spending the time speaking to our members. The recording of this briefing will be available within the next 10 days. We will send out the PDF of the slide deck to share with you. And again, we really would appreciate your feedback. So Megha, Kumar, thank you very much indeed. And I wish everyone a very, very good afternoon. Thank you.